here's your official welcome. Thank you all so much for coming today. It's my pleasure to introduce just one of our facilitators. She moved. To introduce one of our facilitators, Judy Desjardins, who is a retired professor from the Early Childhood Department. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about herself and then introduce the rest of our panel.
Well, welcome. Thank you. Welcome to our very distinguished panel. We have the founder of our program here and the first generation of faculty that we're able to have come today. And they're going to share about the history of the program. Grace is going to share really how it was birthed and launched and how she managed to deal with things alone in the very beginning and where she went from there. Before I start, we have another distinguished guest in the room, and it's our Chancellor of Pierce College District. I want to introduce Michelle Johnson. So let's give her a hand. Thanks for coming. I know you can't stay the whole time, but glad that you're here. So I don't want to talk about me, enough about me. Let's just get started right with Grace. I'm second generation because I began in 1979 and taught through spring quarter 2014. I wasn't full-time all that time, but I was with the program, and I was full-time for 23 years. So I want Grace to come forward. She will talk about how the program began and why it began. So come on up, Grace. Grace Koopman is our founder.
I'm delighted to be here and to share with you something about the history of your program. The college was started in 1967, and 2 years later, early childhood education was started at the college. At the beginning, there was a vocational dean, Homer Halverson, and it was his job at this new college to think of vocational programs so that people would come for training in specific job kind of opportunities. And so he assembled one advisory committee together to consider, should they offer something for people who worked with young children? Was there a need for that, and what should it be like? So at the time, I was working at Tacoma Vocational Technical Institute as a coordinator for parent education in cooperative nursery schools. And Homer called me one day and said, would you come and meet with our committee? We need to know whether it's really feasible to start this program, and we need to know what the program should be like, and we need to know who we should try to get to run the program. So I came out to meet with the committee on several occasions. It wasn't hard for me to describe that the need was great. I was working with cooperative nursery school teachers, and although they were very eager, they were, for the most part, totally untrained, and I knew that education was needed. And so I had, at the Voc School, I had started just a little 27-hour course, trying to pack everything in, that you should get in a 2-year course. And the supervisor said, Grace, nobody will come. You're wasting your time. Well, that place was packed out, and packed out every night. So that was good indication that training was needed in that particular field. So then they said, well, what should it include? And I said, first of all, and most important, it has to be a 2-year associate degree program that is transferable. I did not want it to be a dead end so that people were just trained for low income jobs. I felt that they should be able to transfer on and get better jobs. And so I felt that was the first important thing. I said the second important thing is that the right philosophy has to be in that program. And they said, like what? And I said, well, like what I call the whole child philosophy, where we're concerned about the development of children physically, intellectually, emotionally, and socially. And they thought that sounded okay. I said it needs to be very practically oriented, although it's going to be academically oriented too. It's got to be practical because these people who will come to the classes, at least at the beginning, will be people who are already employed. They need to know exactly what to do with children when the children are there. It can't be all theory. It has to be practical. And I suggested that they should have at least 3/4 of practicum, one in a nursery school, one in a daycare center and one in special education, so that they would be prepared for those fields. I said that eventually you would have to have a lab school, a laboratory nursery school, if you wanted to have a truly great program, and that needed to include an outdoor learning environment as well. I said, but probably most of all, you've got to get somebody with a lot of ambition and a lot of energy and a lot of strength to do this, because it's going to be a terrific job. And later on, when they were asking me what kind of person they should be looking for, and I said, well, two things. That person needs a degree, but I said a degree isn't the answer. They also have to have some practical experience, because if they have worked in a daycare center, if they've worked in nursery schools, if they've maybe been in Head Start, maybe they've worked with parent education, then they are prepared to teach people who are already in those fields, because they've been there and they've done that. So I said, look for someone like that. And they said, like who? And I said, well, I think you will. They wanted to know if I knew someone locally, which I did not. And I said, well, I think it would be good if you would advertise nationally, because they're few and far between anybody who can do this, who's had the experience. So they said, you've had the experience, how about you? And I said, no, thank you, because I saw it as a tremendous backbreaking job to get this thing off the ground and going, and I was perfectly happy where I was. Well, they said, well, then tell us what we should be looking for, because we're not getting any good applicants. And I said, well, look for somebody who's really worked in all those different areas and who has a degree. And I said, you may be able to find someone who has been at some school where those kinds of things were emphasized. And they said, such as where? And I said, well, I know that Oregon State had a very good program, and there was something going on at WSU that was pretty good, but I thought the best was Broad Oaks, which was a branch of Whittier College in Pasadena, California, because that's where I had gone, so I thought it was absolutely the best. Some of you may have heard of Pacific Oaks, and that is on the site where Broad Oaks used to be before they moved to their own campus. Now let me explain why there was nobody. You would think, well, gee, people should be lined up waiting for a good job like that. The reason was that universities and colleges simply did not have programs in early childhood education. Why would they? You couldn't have a career in early childhood education and make any money. You didn't. As Karen Colleran used to say when I was here, she used to say, you know, you can get more money per hour by picking barnacles off of the bottom of boats here in Puget Sound than you can working with children. And that was true. So nobody went into this because there was really no career available at that time. This changed with Head Start, was the beginning of the change, when colleges and universities began to get interested in the early years, because finally people caught on that the early years were important. And so they began to have programs. I would like to mention, well, no, I have too much to say, so I'm going to try to be brief. So Homer Halverson called me, and he said, we want you as our director of our program. And I says, no, I'm not interested. And he says, you have to be, because we can't find anybody else. And so he said, well, at least come and talk to me about it. Well, so I went and talked to him about it, and he tried to persuade me, and I kept saying no. And finally he said, Grace, the committee has decided we're not going to have the program unless you will direct it. Well, I wanted the program, we needed the program, and so, I said, well, I might consider it with certain agreements. I said, you have to agree to certain things, or I don't want to be the director. I says, I only want to be the director of a great program. And I said, there are certain things that have to be true if it's going to be a great program. And so Homer said, well, tell us what they are. I'm sure we can do it. I said, it has to be a transferable degree. It has to be a degree in early childhood education. It's not going to be a degree in child care or playing with children. I said, it's going to be an academic degree. I said, a lab school has to be in the future, because you can't have a great training program without a lab school, and that it has to include an outdoor play learning environment outdoors. I said also, I want to have complete control of the philosophy of the school. I said, we have to have good philosophy. We have to consider the whole child. And I don't want any higher administrator telling me that I have to change my philosophy or have different kinds of philosophies presented, because I knew my philosophy was right. I said that I would need to have adequate time to set up the program, and they said, you can have a year. A year to set up a program, wouldn't that be wonderful? You know, to plan the curriculum, to plan all the different courses, all the course outline, a whole year. I said, well, no, I think we need to strike while it's hot. I said, I think I could do it in a quarter. And so they said, well, you can have a quarter or two, you can have the year if you have to. Well, that sounded better. This job was getting better all the time. Then I said, now, when part-time instructors are hired, I want to have control over who's hired. And I said, and when the day comes that we can have full-time instructors added to the program, I said, I want to have control over who's hired. The reason for that was I wanted the same philosophy. I didn't want people to be arguing about, oh no, this is better, that's better. I wanted everybody on the same page, and that was very important, I felt, for the program, and indeed it's what did make us successful. This was confirmed by the Dean of Instruction, it was confirmed by the vocational dean, and I took it to the college president. I said, these are my demands. If I'm going to do this, this is what is going to happen. They all agreed, and we're so happy to have you, and everything was lovely for a while. Come summer, I had a contract, 1969, for the month of August. I was here before fall quarter. Well, it seems that after I was here 1 week, trying to, get my office organized and even think about where I was, the Dean of Instruction came in. It seems that the former Dean of Instruction had resigned, and we had a new Dean of Instruction, and he said, you will teach fall quarter classes. I says, no, that's not the understanding I have. I'm going to set up the program. I got to figure out the curriculum, all the courses. I said, no, I have an understanding that I do not teach fall quarter. He says, says who? And I says, well, I said so. I had the approval of the Dean of Instruction. I had the approval of the vocational dean and the college president. And he says, I am now Dean of Instruction, and you will teach fall quarter. Well, I went, of course, to the president and so on. And you know what the president said to me? He said, Grace, do you have that in writing? In writing. I was a minister's wife. My word was my bond. And in all the experiences I had had in educational places, I had, your word was your bond. I couldn't believe that now. It was a new ballgame. I thought of resigning before, breaking my contract. But then I realized we would never have an early childhood program here at the college, and so I decided I should see what I could do. So I quickly changed my whole personality. I became aggressive. I became a fighter so that I could fight for what I needed for the program. I became political. It's very interesting. Politics and education. I found out who had the power, what you did to get around that power. It's quite a game, and I hate to play it, but it is very effective. You get what you need. So it was overwhelming. In 3 weeks' time, I was to have this all set up and teach. Well, now, at that time, I had a lot of energy. I was 49. I had a lot more energy than I do now because now I'm 95. And there's quite a difference between 49 and 95. So I could work day and night, and I had wonderful support. I had great support. My husband was on sabbatical leave, and so he was my main support. And 2 other people were tremendous in helping me, and I want to give them credit. They're no longer living. I've outlived some of my staff who were young enough to be my kids, but Nancy Wallace and Mary Jo DeYoung were teachers in cooperative nursery schools, and they had great philosophy, they had great eagerness, and they were eager to be in this program. They were also eager to help me in any way they could. They did grubby secretarial work, they did they would sit and I would show them what I had planned, and they would critique it and give ideas and suggestions as volunteers. They considered me their mentor, and they were wonderful, and I want to give them a lot of credit. I finally got a tiny stipend for them, very inadequate, and Nancy Wallace, who had quite a sense of humor, she said later, Grace, we figured out that for the time we put in, we got about 25 cents an hour. And that was, I'm sure, true. Sometimes they would work after the night class. They were taking my night classes once we started. After the night class, they would stay with me to work on curriculum and ideas. And my husband often brought us dinner. And so I really appreciated them. I want to mention, too, I had special people at the college that really were wonderful. Night custodians were marvelous. They knew that I was working late. They always came and walked me to my car at night. It was 11 or 12 usually when I left, and they were afraid, that I might be harmed, and they would be there. And if I was, after midnight, they would come over and say, "You haven't called us. It's time to go home, Grace." And they would walk me to my car. And the other group that were very helpful were faculty typists. Now, mind you, we didn't have computers. We didn't have electric typewriters. We did not have the Xerox machine. We had old purple duplicators. The print came out in purple. And the faculty typists, bless their hearts, would type up our work for us and have those pages ready. And what we would have done without the faculty typists, I don't know. Students, too, pitched in. Kathy Ivers was one of the students who practically was my secretary. She would spend hours and hours just volunteering her time. She now teaches out in Eatonville. So there were lots of people who supported me and helped me, not the administration, but a different level of service, which meant they really served. Nothing against high administrators, of course. And Michelle was not in that position at that time, I need to say. And I think most of them are now dead, I'm not sure. One problem also was that it was a brand new faculty. I think I can't remember if I was the 9th or the 13th faculty member hired. Maybe the 13th, that's my lucky number, so maybe it was the 13th. Well, we had meetings all the time because they had to figure out the procedures, the rules, their rights, and all this kind of thing. And I had to meet with them where I needed to be in my own office working on the curriculum and so on. Well, back to fall quarter, the beginning of the program. Advising night came, and so we were there, all the faculty was there to advise the students. And when the door opened, all the other people had 2 or 3, maybe even half a dozen students to advise. My line went out the door. They were so eager for this program. To have students that eager, that was pretty exciting. And they stood in line patiently until I could see each one of them. Why? Why was this big turnout? Because we had good PR. People knew me because I had done a lot of speaking in the area. I visited children's centers. I belonged to professional organizations, so that when they found out I was starting the program, they said, "Hey, that sounds good," so it was kind of an automatic PR. However, also we got great newspaper publicity. In fact, the whole 16 years I was here, we had wonderful opportunities with the newspapers. I think that may have gotten much more difficult because it's not that easy to get things in the papers nowadays. But every time I offered a new class, I had some journalism experience, so I would write an article and I would take it down to the newspaper and have a picture with it, and it would get in the Tacoma paper and in the local papers. So it was easy to spread the word, and we had lots of flyers that we had sent out. So who came that first quarter? Cooperative nursery school teachers, they were there in mass. Daycare personnel, a few. Mothers who just thought it would be good to get back into the workforce in their 30s and 40s. That first quarter, I don't think we had a single high school grad who had just gotten out of high school because they were all people who were a little more mature, but so eager. I had instructors come from other college districts. There were instructors who were working as coordinators for cooperative nursery schools throughout the state. That was a huge program then. And they came. One woman told me that it took her 3.5 hours to get to class. It was an evening class, and 3 hours to get home. And she was there twice a week, and she worked full time. That was a kind of passion that these people had for doing a good job if they were going to work with children. Now, the facilities that we had were quite interesting. The college was housed at Fort Albertson's grocery store, a former Fort Albertson's. They had moved out, and they put up partitions in this huge space. Not walls. It didn't go to the ceiling, no. So you could hear everything that everybody else was doing. I was next door to an administrator. I don't think he realized I heard everything he said. He commented on all the other administrators, all the people at the college. I could have used that, I never did, but I often wondered if he didn't realize that the college president was very close to him and could probably hear too. The first night that I had classes, when I was going to show a movie, I turned out the light and the lights went out in the whole building. So there was a little work to be done in that building. It was an interesting experience. I taught in high schools at night. I taught in churches. I taught wherever we could find space to teach, out in Puyallup and different places in the college district. Finally, they built the first building on campus. And so the administrators and a few programs came to this campus in a small building. But early childhood education was not at the top of the list for moving. So instead, we stayed where we were at Fort Albertson's, but we finally did get a portable, the J portable on campus. It was not in good shape. In fact, one of my part-time instructors fell through the floor in that particular portable. We advanced into a better portable, the G portable, which was a great improvement. And then finally, in 1975, we were to have our new early childhood education building. What excitement to think that we were going to have our own building with a lab school. The problem was that architects don't evidently at time, they didn't know how to design lab schools. I had had a big box of all the ideas I'd collected in case I could ever, help to build a school of any kind, which the architect asked for and which was misplaced. I never got my ideas back, but they were pretty much in my brain, so I could do a little sketching and explain, but it took hard work with the architect to help him understand what we were trying to do in the lab school, and on the whole, it worked out quite well. However, that summer that it was built, before it was built, we fought for every square inch. We couldn't have an office for a secretary because we were told by administration we would never have a secretary. We weren't that important. We needed more than one classroom, but we could only get one classroom. Nancy Wallace was quite creative at thinking up names for the different spaces. So we had a space that, was for the secretary, but we called it something else to get it by the administration. You have to do these things, you have to think a little creatively in order to get what you want. And if you know what you want, and you feel passionate about it, you will fight for it. Let's see, where shall I go next? Well, so that summer, I said, I really need a contractor for the summer. Now, most of the time I was here, I did not have any release time to be the director of the program. I taught full loads. Toward the end of my 16 years, I got a little release time. So I was working pretty hard. And I asked for a summer contract because I understood that someone in media had gotten a summer contract. And I said, I need to be here because the building's being built and I need to stick up for what we need to have. And they said, this is kind of interesting because they said, well, you see, Grace, we don't need to give you a contract because The media person won't come and work in the summer unless he's paid. But we know that you care so much about your program, you'll be here anyway. And of course, I was. So all that summer, I'd come every day to see how it was progressing, and I would find what they weren't doing right or a change I wanted to make. They hated change orders. I did get a few of those, but it was a pretty hard fight to get those. But one day I came and I said, there's supposed to be an electric outlet right here. And I see, have you finished it looks like you finished your electrical work, but there needs to be an outlet right here. And the fellow said, no, no, that's not on the plan. I said, it's on the plan, so it needs to be right here. And he says, it's not on the plan. I says, please go get the plan. Of course, it was on the plan. So I pointed it out that it was on the plan. And as I walked away, he said to the fellow who was working with him, he said, I had no idea she knew how to read blueprints. She's a weird woman. And his coworker said, she's just smarter than you are. So once in a while you get a little boost. We didn't get the outdoor area right away, which I felt was very important, because they needed to use that as a staging area for the floor that was going to be built on top of us at a later time. And I said, well, then when you take the roof off, it will rain on us, and we will get, our lab school will be wet. Oh, no, that's all taken care of, it's all taken care of. It was taken care of. We had floods in the lab school when they took the roof off. So, but we finally, years later, did get an outdoor play area. They had said the only place we could have was underneath the main building. We could troop the kids over here and be under the main building. That would have been really great. So I forgot that. And finally, by playing politics, and that's kind of, I won't tell you that story, but you know, you have to play what you have to play the game. We finally got the outdoor area, which I think you all know is quite delightful and very unusual compared to other places. I would like to say just a little bit about the place that women had in that day. It was a different day. I got no release time because I was a woman, and he said, actually, the dean said to me, you know, Grace, you're a woman, and we expect you to work harder for less money because, remember, you're a woman. Like I didn't know. When I got an electric typewriter, that was really exciting. You know, imagine an electric typewriter being exciting because we were so far behind on everything. And finally, the dean came and brought me a calculator. And he said, now, Grace, I'm going to give you a calculator, you know, like it was a big gift. And he says, now sit down and I'll explain to you how it works because I know women aren't good at this sort of thing. I had a calculator at home. I taught him a thing or two. We tried to be, let me get back to staff. At first I taught all the classes, which was not easy. And then after Nancy Wallace and Mary Jody Young had taken my methods classes, they had the right philosophy. They were great. They taught then some of those methods classes, like literature and art and those kinds of things. Finally, though, I figured out I had enough FTEs that I was providing for the college that I deserved 2 full-time instructors, and I was the only full-time person. And so finally, we were awarded in 1973, that's 4 or 5 years after the beginning of the program, that our first 2 instructors were Nancy Wallace and Karen Colleran. And Nancy was inbred, you know, she had come through our program, and Karen brought a fresh perspective to our program, so it was a great hire. And from then on, life was so much better. It wasn't nearly as lonely. I had staff people who agreed with me that we wanted to have a great program, and they worked very hard. We were always accused of being incestuous because we kept hiring our own graduates. It was what made us successful because we were all on the same page. We never had to argue about philosophy. We could work as a team, and that's what it takes if you want to have a successful program, is to be a team. I was very picky about even hiring part-timers. I had PhDs in early childhood education who had them from the East Coast who would come and want to apply as a part-time instructor. I didn't want them because they didn't have any practical experience. In fact, one who said, "I have a PhD. Do all your instructors have PhDs?" And I said, "No, none of them do. In fact, I don't either. But we know what we're doing, and we like our philosophy." And I said, "And you haven't had enough experience." And she says, "Experience? I have a PhD." And I said, if you really want to teach a part-time class, I said, come and take my intro class, which I teach, and I will know when you've taken that class and done all the assignments, whether or not I would like to have you as a part-time instructor. She did. She came, and after about 6 sessions of the class, she was a great student, about 6 sections of the class, I said, "So how do you feel now about being an instructor?" And she says, "Grace, I couldn't teach for you." She says, I don't know where you learned all this." She says, "I wouldn't know. No, I can't teach for you at all. My background it's all theory. It's all theory." And that is the trouble with lots of programs. They aren't practical enough. You've got to be academic, but you also have to be practical. Our team we were a team. Everybody was cooperative. We had fun together. We worked together. We supported each other. We taught what was needed. Our students needed night classes. They needed a Saturday class. They needed long blocks of time. You can't have a job and come for 50 minutes every day for 5 days a week. So we tailored our program to what the needs were. And the staff was wonderful. We all did what we had to do, whether it was our favorite time to teach or not. We always welcomed input. And I think that helped to make our program successful because we liked suggestions. We liked criticism. No matter how good you are, you could always be better. We knew we had a good program, but it could be better. We knew we taught well, but we could do a better job. And so I had a spindle on my desk and told people, put on your suggestions, you don't have to sign it. See, anonymous people have true good criticism. I don't go with these people who say, well, anonymous letters, I just throw them in the wastebasket. They're valuable, and we valued any input that we could get. We tried to be innovative. We thought of a lot of special programs that we'd like to have. Sometimes we wrote grants and got money for those, such as we had Let's Dine Out, where we had parents and children come in at night in the evening for dinner and parent education. We had special classes for foster parents. We had Head Start personnel that came to classes. We started a daycare center off campus for students, and then later there was one on campus for students. We had classes for mothers and toddlers, mothers and newborns, all kinds of classes. The biggest parent education effort that we made, of course, was cooperative nursery schools. And Mary Kay is going to tell all about that because she was in charge of that. That was a great day when she came on board to work out in the college district. I was a little tired of running out to Eatonville, running out to Sumner, running out, to help these instructors. And when Mary Kay came, that was her job, and that was really great. Gave me more time to do other things. Why were we successful? Because I think we were successful. Because of our great PR, which I've already talked about, the public relations, the great newspaper publicity, we displayed at every opportunity. If there was a display in the mall, we were there. If at the fair, we were there. At conferences, we had a logo that was actually based on the jewelry that I'm wearing, the media department. And Mary Kay has on the one I gave to all the staff members of the actual logo. And we had that logo everywhere. So every piece of paper that went out from us, every display that we had that logo so that people knew, hey, Fort Steilacoom Community College is doing something here in early childhood education. Got to look into that. That was very effective. I think one of the big, at the beginning of the program, one of the big PR things that really helped advertise our program was that I heard about Haim Ganat. Haim Ganat was the author of a bestseller, Between Parent and Child, and later Between Parent and Teenager. And I thought if we could get Haim Ganat to come and talk, everybody would come. Thousands of people would know that we had this program at the college. Well, the administration said nobody would come. It was too expensive. They couldn't do it. But they said, finally, I kept writing them down. Finally, they said, if you can get people to promise up to $2,000 when we go in the hole, then you can schedule him. So I did that, and I scheduled him. We had it at the PLU field house, and we had 3,500 there twice when he came. Then there were all those people who knew that early childhood education was alive and well at the college, so that was great publicity. I think the primary reason we were successful was we had the same basic philosophy, and we worked as a team. At one time, there were 21 instructors. I was working with part-time and full-time, and all of us, 21 people, we were on the same page. We weren't arguing about how things should be done. It made a tremendous difference. Another thing that made us successful was we cared about our students. We really cared about our students. We took care of our students. And we understood over in admissions when they got somebody who was kind of hopeless and needed a lot of help, they said, well, send them over to ECE, they'll take care of them, because we did take care of our students. We had a wide variety of students eventually, older people, younger people, kids just out of high school, parents, people who were trying to get custody back of their children would come and take our classes. We had students from Purdy Prison on school release who came. We had a wide variety of kinds of students. Of course, everything I say is probably the most important reason we were successful, but the real reason we were successful was everyone had a passion for what we were doing. They all knew that we were doing something really important, and I think that made everybody go the extra mile. During the 16 years that I was here, I was only here 16 years. I think some of these were here 30 or something. But during that time, I got very few, if any, compliments from the administration. And I can understand why. I was constantly arguing with them and fighting with them to get something for my program that they didn't want to give. So I could understand that they didn't, really find me their favorite person. When I retired, then I got some accolades from the administration, which was very nice. I kind of enjoyed it. But, it was not important to me whether I got appreciation from the administration, because I knew inside that I was doing something worthwhile, something worth doing. And I knew that lives were being changed, that students would influence lives in the future who would be changed because they had been in our program. So I didn't have to wait for someone else to pat me on the back. But it doesn't hurt. So when you see somebody doing a good job, pat them on the back, support your colleagues. They need you. And it was my colleagues that gave me strength. And we give each other a pat on the back when we needed it. But sometimes you have to pat yourself on the back. And go ahead, because you know what you're doing inside. You know what it means to you to do it. Accolades may come later. You may never know whose life you changed. I had a phone call a couple of years ago from a woman who was in the program in the 70s, and she called me from back east just to let me know that she wanted me to know that early childhood education at the college had changed her life. She says, "You saved my marriage, you changed my life, you have made my family a happy, successful family." So you may not hear, but know in your heart that if you have the passion and you're doing your job, you are influencing people. So I encourage you to feel that way. Don't sit around waiting for the accolades. You have no idea how many lives you're changing. Be a team, stick to your philosophy, and make your job your passion if you're going to be in early childhood education. Always remember you are engaged in the most important work that could possibly be done on this earth. You're changing lives. Be proud of what you do and work with passion. You do make a difference. God bless you, and God bless. And God bless early childhood education.
Oh, okay, all right. Thank you so much, Grace. She was able to bring in a lot of the original detail about how the whole program began, and we appreciate it. It set context for our other two speakers. So Mary Kay Brown is going to go next. Mary Kay was my introduction to Pierce College, then Fort Steilacoom Community College. So for those of you who might not have quite understood why Grace was referring to this as Fort Steilacoom Community College, that was our original name until 1985. And that happened to be the year that Grace retired. And so Mary Kay was hired to oversee the cooperative nursery schools. She is going to describe what those were. Some of you may not know, and tell us about that program and how it worked. It actually took the Pierce College, or the Fort Steilacoom Community College.
And we're very supportive of one another throughout the early years of this program. I came to Fort Steilacoom actually as a student. Just very briefly, my background, I was a kindergarten teacher, and I came here to Tacoma from the Midwest, had a job in Tacoma, down at Tacoma Day Nursery in the Hilltop area, working with 2.5 through 5-year-olds. And the co-worker that I was with at that time really gave me a lot of credit when I looked at her and said, these children are quite different than the kindergarten children. And she was so pleased, because I think she even may have said this to Grace, I thought I had another elementary teacher I had to train. And Mary Kay figured out that she didn't know a whole lot about 2.5-year-olds in a group situation. So anyway, I came out here to Fort Steilacoom, to the J building, I believe it was, to take a class. And instead, I took the EC degree. So career paths in early childhood education come many different ways. Some come from nursing backgrounds, a variety of backgrounds. Mine had been as an elementary teacher, and then into the child care situation in the Hilltop area. And then I was a substitute for Head Start throughout the Tacoma area for a while. And so I had that background. But so I got my BA, taught kindergarten, which I thought I'd be there forever instead of only 2 years. And then a second grade classroom split, 30 children in it. Was actually my last public school full-time teaching experience, because that was rather overwhelming to teach first graders, second graders, 30 children, and the beginning of busing for integration. So you had children coming in and out of the classroom at different times of day. So it was very tough to get a group feeling. So not only for children and staff, but children too need that community feeling. That's a very important thing, as you all are probably quite aware of. But anyway, I took that class, got my AA. I kept trying to figure out where, because there's no early childhood programs here for a master's in the area. So I held on to the credits that I took here at Fort Steilacoom for 10 years, thinking I could work them into a graduate program. I thought I was going to be very creative. It didn't happen. So 10 years later, I actually got the degree after I'd finished the program, and then went on for my master's. So you come in different ways. And I went for the master's. The chancellor's left, so it's okay, I think, to say. I went after the master's because I needed it to keep my job, to teach here at the college. That was the times they were changing. And I learned a lot from the master's program. I learned I did not want to be an elementary principal. And that was what my degree was in at that time. But I brought a lot of that back here. And just before I start about the co-ops, I just want to say I became the director when Grace retired in 1985. And as you can imagine, the dynamo that we had here, what do you do for the first staff meeting following Grace Koopman's? And so what I did, and Karen will be the only one that might remember, and Grace brought it up today. She mentioned the custodian and how important the custodian is. When I taught kindergarten, the custodian was my team member because I was the kindergarten teacher. And the kindergartens were always off, away from the real teachers. Sometimes that was the feeling. And so the first staff meeting, I brought our custodian from the ECE program building to come share with us what he or she, I can't even remember who it was at the time. Do you remember, Karen? But I think it was a woman. But what was it that we could do as part of the team to make her life easier and our lives easier so we could get to the commitment of dealing with the children, working with the children, providing for the children, and all of that. So that's what I did. I took this approach that let's try that. But why I came to the college then, after I was taking the classes, I got hired part-time to work with the cooperative nursery schools. And I didn't know much about cooperative nursery schools except what I'd learned in the intro class. And I don't know if Grace mentioned, but if she did, I wasn't listening, and I don't tune out Grace very often, so if it happened, forgive me. But if you wanted to teach, no matter what, you took the intro class. She made it sound a little bit like an option. It wasn't an option, and that was because then you knew what was happening and what it was all about. So I learned about the cooperative nursery schools. If you're not familiar, very quickly, you'll study them. There was a large group of cooperative nursery schools in this state. I believe they started after World War II. And it was the parents involved in the education of their young children. So it'd be 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, mostly 3, 4s, and 5s, I think, originally. And parents worked in the classroom as assistant teachers. They also were on the board that ran the schools. They hired the teachers. And those were in existence in this area, and many of them, when I started working in the area, were with the VOTEC schools. Grace, at that time, when she started the ECE program, was teacher training. That was her focus. That's what she wanted. Some people approached her about working with the cooperative, but it was those teachers, they were working with the young children who came to the night classes, who came to the Saturday classes. So she wanted to teach them how to be teachers, not to how to run the schools at that point. That was how, but people from the community, nursery schools that were already existing, came, and we called them nursery schools because I have a little quirk about anything being a pre-school, that if it's a school, it's a school, it's not a pre-anything, but that's my quirk. Okay, and I think we used to support that all, but it changes sometimes. Anyway, so when the community came and went to the board or whoever in charge of the college and said, we want this program to do it. We've taken the classes from Grace and the other people. We want you to come out and coordinate these programs. So we did. The part that not only the parents, paid tuition and had the board and ran the school, they worked in the classroom, but the third component was they took parent education classes on child development, on interacting with children. All of those things was part of the cooperative nursery school. So I and others were hired to go out to these nursery schools, and they were throughout the county, to be the instructor of the parents who ran these, and they were lab schools in that sense of the cooperatives out there. So we did that for many years, and then I was hired to coordinate those for full-time. I started part-time and then did that for a period of years. Then I'm not sure even how many years ago, but I believe the college no longer coordinates cooperative nursery schools because things changed along the way, and so statewide there was some cutbacks and different programs on the cooperative, the colleges going out and providing services for them. The other thing that we had come along the way was Head Start, and Head Start was in the lab school for several years, and I was also at one time the director of the Head Start of the one school. Then Becky Wolfelstig did it for a long time, and the program changed. That funding was cut in the area for Head Start, and the lab school program was cut because it was only one classroom versus many places where they had several Head Start classrooms and so on. But I just have to, a real quick aside, one of the tough things for me running, being the director of the Head Start program is I had a lot of experience, but it was never dealing with buses and hiring bus drivers and all that went with that. So Clover Park School District was very helpful to me at that time. So it's a variety of things that took place during that time when, as I mentioned, I was a director right after Grace, and then Karen Colleran became the director, and then that's when I was Head Start director and a variety of things. The job was always changing. The philosophy, again, be part of the team. What have we learned from the experience? Once in a while, Karen Colleran would say that just to me a little too often. When we were working on a project, and something wouldn't go right, and I just wanted to be frustrated. But she would say, every moment was a teaching moment. What have we learned from this experience? What can we do? How can we change to make things better? So Grace mentioned nighttime classes, daytime classes, the block classes. Way back in the early 70s when she was first talking about it, one of the reasons I think we were fortunate and got the block classes was also there was a gas shortage when you couldn't fill up your gas tank. Coming to campus every day versus coming 2 days a week and getting your degree had a great influence on it as well. So anything I'm missing on, Judy? Do I need to look at the list?
Just do a quick gap analysis here.
Okay.
When did you begin teaching in the degree program on campus, Mary Kay? Do you
Oh,
remember that?
okay, yes. I started out throughout the district in 1973, and in 1984, I was allowed to come to the Fort Steilacoom campus to teach for a year, and my director out in Puyallup let me know that it was only going to be a 1 year time, and then I would be back out, that he was not going to allow that to happen. And he left, and so then I got to stay and on campus, and I started teaching. So in 1984, I taught part-time, taught the art class, in the evenings and so on. And then I stayed until 2007. So that's kind of.
All right, great, Mary Kay. Thank you so much. So I mentioned Mary Kay was my introduction to Fort Steilacoom Community College, and Grace mentioned a few times about changing the lives of people. And I just want to add in, because Karen wants us to take as much time as possible. I don't know if she's feeling shy today or what, but I'm just going to take a moment to say I'm one of those people whose life was changed by this program, and it was through the Cooperative Nursery School program, where I thought I was enrolling my child in a nursery school experience. That was my goal as a parent, and I was registering my child in a cooperative nursery school program. But I was required to register for a class, and it was then a 4-credit class called Parent and Child. And I had no idea when I went to orientation that this was schooling for me as well. And that schooling for me that was coordinated first by Grace, as she worked with parent educators who would go into those co-ops and hold parent education classes, and then subsequently it was coordinated by Mary Kay. Those classes on child development, child learning, family issues meant everything to me. I was completely heading down the wrong path as far as discipline within our home until I actually was able to take parent education. And so really, I just applied myself and I became enthusiastic about it. It caught on with me. I took all of those classes that I could, and ultimately Mary Kay hired me to be a parent educator as well. That was my start in the program. But it completely changed the course of our family, receiving that parent education. Even though it wasn't the kind of class that you are registered in where you're in class 5 hours a week, I was in the laboratory nursery school. I rotated in at least for one class every week. I went to parent education classes. I served on a committee, and I did that through both children. And as I worked through all of that, the philosophy and all of the specific learning that I needed to really do a good job with family was given to me through that venue. So I will forever be appreciative, and I don't think my children have written Grace and Mary Kay thank you letters, but they should have, for sure, because it really changed our family. I'm going to introduce Karen Colleran now. And she actually, as you know, was hired in 1973, and she'll be talking primarily about what it was like as the courses were built in the collaborative way that Grace and Mary Kay have talked about. Karen's going to give some specific detail on that, and really anything else she wants to. So Karen, come on up.
I don't speak anymore. Ever since I retired, it's amazing how you don't know how to do it after a while. But I think I want to concentrate on the practicum because it always fascinated me. So do we still do 3 practicums? Okay. So one of the things that Grace had me do when I was hired was do a practicum in co-ops, in special education, and in the co-ops, special education, and childcare, and childcare. So, so that was a great thing because I came in not knowing this philosophy, but I had just come from Central and doing my master's in education with an emphasis in early childhood. And I had gone from being a first grade teacher to going to Central and teaching their lab school there with 3-year-olds. And I came back to Franklin Pierce School District and I knew I wasn't going to stay there, because 3-year-olds I had never known them, but they were the best thing I had ever met. So I got pretty excited when this job opened. But the issue would be, how do you take theory, how do you take all the classes you're asked to take, and then implement it in a practicum? And that's what gives us that vocational piece, that we've got to actually do it after we learn something about it. And throughout all the years of teaching with Grace's whole philosophy idea, it just made so much sense to me. But how do we make sure it's in every course, enough so that the student is going to actually be able to go into, I hear it's Ray's practicum. She was my student. I'm so proud of you. And how are they going to be able to do that? And what I found was it didn't seem to matter what their grade point was. In other words, they could get 2.0 or 2.2 or something in music for children, and be 4-point at doing it with the children. And it went the other way. So what in the world is that about? And that's truly what I think our whole education system has a problem with. How do we do it in the classroom so that most of the students learn? And the problem is, what Grace taught us is when you did the whole child, you had individual differences in every single one of them. So even if they were 4, it didn't, it wasn't like this little chart that said every 4-year-old will do this. It wasn't like that. And so the great fun of this whole job for me was taking the philosophy that was so strongly embedded in this program and then trying to figure out how to get people ready to give of themselves. And that was another issue. To do the philosophy, you had to let go of yourself. Because if you really cared about the children, it wasn't about you anymore. And how do you do that? And it was the same way when we were teaching students. Sometimes our students, our college students, needed emotional support or physical support or whatever. And how do you make sure you're getting the content across, but also develop the inner strength of that person? And I think we're doing that with 3-year-olds. I think we're doing it with 5-year-olds, all the way up and including community college and graduate school. So for me, that was the big emphasis. What did happen during my tenure when I was the director of the program was that we had to come up with outcomes and rewrite all the courses. And Judy especially helped me do that. It took many years, so she followed me and she was involved in that whole time. But it made sense to me because outcomes is exactly what we had to get to if we were going to take the theory and put it into practice. And all I can say, I guess, as something that I learned from all that was that if we don't practice it and pretend, even those silly things where we were pretending to do music times and science times and all of those, and how we had to build with blocks to find out about blocks. If we don't do that, we're never going to get it to the children in the same way, because we actually sort of all need to be the children to be a great teacher. Along the way, we have to go through some of those processes. So I think that's really the most important thing I want to say to you, that these practicums, and this is an intro class mainly, right, that are here. When you take music for children and when you take art for children, and you start feeling what it feels like, and maybe, just maybe, you didn't get those experiences as a child yourself, that will change you forever. So I'm just so proud to be part of this program and to see that it's still continuing and that our students come back and also make up the program as they come back and teach for us. That's pretty exciting as well. So I think that's what I'd like to say, and I loved being here. Now I'm in a whole different world, gardening and doing other things, so I just respect everything that you're doing.
I'd like to thank all 3 of you. That was so informative and well done. I want to know, we can dismiss really any time. We don't need to go to 1:30, but I'd like to ask whether there are any, first of all, I think comments from our faculty members in the audience, Greg, Marguerite, Lynette, Meredith, our faculty members in the program. Do you want to add anything? Just a burning thought?
I'm always one who speaks, so I'm going to speak. I was lucky to have every single person on the stage as my teacher. And at the time that I came to Pierce College, I was the director of the programs at McCord Air Force Base. I'm laughing at Grace as I listen to her battles. And I'm going to swear from it. I don't swear, but they used to refer to me as the old bitch that ran the child development program. Because I was always fighting for something. And I also have to honor what Karen said, because I was a 4-year-old teacher accidentally and became the director. And we never had any toys. We had hundreds of children. And so I had to buy toys that I thought I knew all about kids. And then I suddenly realized I hadn't got a clue what toddlers like, what babies like, etc. And the children taught me. And all I can say, and also Judy taught me how to articulate.
Oh, for
Ray
goodness
taught me
sake.
how to sleep in the painted room sometimes as well. I was grateful for them because through their work, they changed me. And I'm called the philosophers. And when you take intro, please pay attention to philosophers, because they tell us something that they experienced, and they say, why am I thinking that? So pay attention to the philosophers. And then I changed a lot of children. The staff changed me, the children taught us, and we taught lots of children in the military system. And we had a wonderful program, and I'm grateful to all of the ladies and all of my co-workers who talked to, and used to talk to. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Marguerite. Anyone else? Ray, I didn't mean to miss you. Greg?
I'll throw something in for sure. This is touchy-feely and mushy, but I'll throw it in there. Wow, here we go again. I wasn't gonna cry. I emailed you while you guys were talking. That's what I was like, on my phone and questioning and getting an email. You touched my heart because you said it's about the whole child. And when people say, "Why did you come here and teach?" Because I taught babies and child care and I said, well, I'm not sure. Marguerite said, well, you're going to impact a lot of people. But so when people say, what's the difference between teaching a college student and a 2-year-old? For me, truly, is its body size. That's the only difference. A human is a human.
That's right.
When I got here in 1981, I was broken. I was a broken human being. You guys saved my life. You did. And it just keeps passing forward,
That's right.
That's what this program is. It's not just curriculum and assignments. It's the humans, man. It's huge. And I found a quote that I think this is what all of you did. It's from the top. It says, a leader is best when people barely know he or she exists. When his or her work is done, his or her aims fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves. That's what you guys do. That's what you taught me. When you were talking about the inner self, it was never about you. It was always you trying to help people find themselves. That's what we do for each other. That's what we do for children. That's what we pass forward. That's what this program is about. I never heard you guys say once, I, me, mine. It was always us, we. And that's huge. And that's what, so thanks for that legacy. It's amazing. So
Yeah.
I'm done. I'll start crying.
Thank you, Greg. Anyone else from current faculty doing all right?
I think we can top that, man.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been an honor for me to be in the same room. All three of these, the first generation, and I believe you're the only ones left of the first generation of teachers, really. Every one of them mentored me. And that has meant everything to me as well. When I think it was Grace who said, we took care of our students. That's what Greg was talking about. What an understatement. She didn't emphasize it a lot, but the heart of the program has always been, and I know still is, taking care of the students. You aren't just a student in a class to your faculty members, to your instructors. You are important, you are cared for, you are given guidance, and you'll find that true as you go through the whole of the program. And I'm thankful that that legacy is still here, and I know that it is. So thank you very much.
While still having high expectations. because
Absolutely.
know that students are so capable.
Amen, sister. Okay. Well, thanks. If there's nothing more, we will dismiss. Is that okay, Chrissy?